Smart English. The smartest way to learn English.
Hello everyone, it is me Akmaljon Husanov again from Smart English. Assalomu alaykum barchaga, men Akmaljon Husanov Smart Englishdan. You know, a lot of students ask questions on IELTS speaking and they say, excuse me teacher, how shall I get band 9 in speaking? Ustoz, qandoq qilib biz band 9 ola olamiz speakingdan? Or sometimes they say, shall we use the idioms on speaking test? Ya'ni idiomalardan foydalanish kerakmi IELTS speaking testda degan savollar berishadi. Va yana bir sevikli savollardan biri shuki, if there is a question asked by the examiner that I don't know the answer, what should be my answer? Ya'ni agarki examiner bizdan savol so'rasa va o'shini savolini javobini biz bilmasak, especially on part 3, ya'ni part 3 da shundoq bo'ladi, qandoq qilib javob berishimiz kerak degan savol bor. Endi men o'ylab qoldim. Bilasiz, Smart Englishda bizda xorijdan kelgan mutaxassislarimiz bor. Kanada, Amerika, Angliyadan ustozlarimiz bor. Men ulardan biri bilan keling bir intervyu qilsam. Ya'ni IELTS speaking testni olsam, unda qandoq bo'lar ekan va o'shanda o'quvchilarning savollariga zo'r javob bo'ladi deb bugungi videoni tayyorladik. Xullas, gapni cho'zmaylikda Kanadadan kelgan mutaxassisimiz Mr.Bonkdan bilan bo'lgan IELTS speaking testni birgalikda tomosha qilsak.
Hello, my name is Bonk. I'm from Canada. I am one of the IELTS instructors here at Smart English in Marhamat. And I would love to have you watch this video as an example that we've put together to help you see what a band 9 score on the speaking exam might look like. Don't forget, when you watch our video, if you have comments or questions that you'd like to share, please contact us so we can give you some feedback. And we hope that you find this helpful and entertaining. So thank you. Let's get started.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. I am Akmaljon Husanov from Smart English Education Center in Uzbekistan. And today we'll have to have the speaking test with you based on the IELTS standards. And I'd love to ask you some questions about yourself at the beginning of the test. At first, can you please tell me your full name?
Yes, it's Bonk. That spelling is B-O-N-K.
Thank you. And what shall I call you?
Christian is fine.
All right, Christian, let's talk about the town or city you live in now. And how long have you lived in this city?
Well, currently I'm living in a city called Marhamat, which is in Uzbekistan. I came here about 4 months ago to start a teaching contract, and it's my first experience living in this country. Marhamat is kind of a smaller city, about 7 hours drive from Tashkent, which is the capital in Uzbekistan. So if you haven't been there, it's I guess smaller, you could say, by Uzbekistan standards, but it's a medium-sized, pretty lively city for me.
All right, thank you. Do tourists visit your city? Why not?
That's a good question. I don't really know since I'm not from here. I don't think Marhamat is a very touristy kind of city. That's not the impression I get. It's a smaller town. It's a bit far from the center. But there may be historical places that would be of interest to a tourist from within the country. I wouldn't be able to say that. Personally, I think that it's probably a bit smaller than, it's part of a larger province, which is called the Andijan region, and Andijan is the neighboring city, which is a little bit more cosmopolitan, you could say, for other levels. I don't know that Marhamat has a very big tourist attraction. Yeah.
What places do you think tourists should see in your city?
So you'll notice in this section that I couldn't really give a full answer. As you've gathered, I'm not actually from Marhamat, and I was asked a difficult question about tourism and why tourists would come to this city. What I tried to do here was do what you would do on a real exam. Remember that when you're given the test, you won't know the topics in advance, and you might very well be caught off guard by a question that you don't understand, can't answer properly, or for some other reason have difficulty with. What you want to do is not panic and give a full answer to the best of your ability. Remember that the examiner is not really interested in what your answer is or the content of your answer. The main point is to show that you can express yourself fully and coherently in English. So even if you're caught off guard by a question for any reason, you want to try to give a full answer and never give just a simple yes or no or one-word answer. And that's what we tried to demonstrate here by making it a natural response. Again, I can't really answer that because I don't know if there are any places that are specifically interesting to tourists in Marhamat. I suspect most people from larger cities might go to Andijan in this region.
All right. In that case, let's move to another type of question. I'd love to ask you about the kind of music you listen to. And what kind of music do you prefer and why?
Well, I listen to quite a lot of music. My father was a musician, so I grew up with a lot of music. I prefer mostly listening to rock music, but from the 60s or 70s, from a little bit farther behind, more my generation. And as I've gotten older, I listen to quite a bit of jazz and classical music as well. So a lot of different types of music, some of which I didn't like when I was younger. And recently I've grown more interested in classical music, actually.
Thank you. Have you ever been to a music concert? Why not?
Yes, I've been to many. As I said, my father was a musician and my mother also loved music, so they took me to concerts even when I was very young, about 6 or 7 years old. They would sometimes take me to concerts of different singers in Detroit, which is a big American city close to where I grew up, and it was very common to go there to see many big name singers would come through in those days. That was the big city to see performances, so I got to see concerts even at a very young age, yes.
Thank you. Why do you think music is important to people?
I think music is important to people because it makes an emotional connection for many of us. We often have memories that are tied in with music. Great events in our lives and special occasions often connect with music. At least for many of us they do. And I think that's why it appeals to people, and it's just something that you can see people use as a way of marking the big important events in their lives, at weddings and at funerals and anything. You always have music combined with whatever the event might be, and it's important for people. It creates a memory.
All right, thank you. Now let's move to the part 2. And in this part 2, I'd love to give you a topic and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Okay, before you talk, you've got 1 minute to think about what you are going to say, and you can make notes if you wish. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, here's some paper and pencil. I think you got a pen. You can use it. I'd like you to describe a TV program you enjoyed when you were a child. All right, remember you've got 1 to 2 minutes, so don't worry if I stop you. Can you start now, please?
Okay. The question is about a program that I enjoyed as a child. The program I chose to discuss is called The Twilight Zone. It's a very famous name. I think most people are familiar with the name. Just to explain, if you haven't seen it, it was very popular even before I was a child. This is a very old program from the 1950s, I think, black and white TV. Even when I was a kid, we used to watch it. It was already what are called reruns, where you would watch shows that had already been on. But it was very popular when I was a child, and I think I liked it, and a lot of children liked it because it was a kind of a fantasy program. I guess a mixture of fantasy and what we call science fiction, some mystery, some horror elements. It dealt with kind of fantastical situations, and it also was very good. It kind of taught lessons, just like sort of fairy tales that you learn when you're a child. It taught you lessons about good and bad and about how to behave and things like that. It also talked about social problems and war and really serious issues, but in an entertaining and fun kind of way that was very original for the time. When was it on? It was as I said, it was a rerun. So this was not a new show. Even as I was a child, it would have been in afternoon reruns, we used to call them, where shows that would come on after you came home from school. So at like 4 in the afternoon, it was common to have shows that were geared towards kids would want to watch them when they came home from school. And this was a very popular one. It would be on in late afternoon. Everybody would rush home to see an episode of that, to watch The Twilight Zone. And why did you enjoy the program as a child? Again, I can only repeat, it was because if you liked fantasy and science fiction and seeing kind of futuristic ideas or fantasy ideas, this was an interesting place to see ideas that weren't realistic. They weren't everyday life. They were kind of fantastical and really interesting and unusual.
Thank you. Would you still like this program today?
Yes, I would. In fact, I recently watched some episodes online. I downloaded some. I hadn't seen it in years, and I watched it, and I felt it still was a really interesting show. It was maybe a little old-fashioned in parts, but parts of it are still very contemporary and modern. So it was very, very interesting.
I see. Did your friends enjoy this program too?
Yes. Again, that was the one that was very popular with all kids my age. All loved this show, and we used to talk about it because, again, it was just very unusual and fantastic. And at that age, it really captured our imagination quite a lot. Yeah.
Cool. We've been talking about the TV program or radio program you enjoyed when you were a child. I'd like to ask you one or two more general questions about this topic. Now let's consider first of all about TV and radio in your country. In your country, which do people prefer, watching TV or listening to radio, and why?
That's an interesting question. I would have to say television is much more popular nowadays, and the internet, of course. Radio hasn't really been popular for many years. I think it was when I was younger, but nowadays radio is not as popular as it used to be. 40 or 50 years ago, it just isn't as interesting for most people as TV or the internet.
I see. Thank you. What kind of programs are most popular?
Yeah, in Canada, to be honest, I haven't watched TV for a long time because I've been living abroad. When I do see Canadian television, I think people mostly like political shows. It's actually very popular to watch. News shows are very popular in Canada. We have a program called The National, which is very popular, and it's an hour-long weekly segment that talks about contemporary social issues and also international issues, and it's really interesting. Even as a teacher, I've often used it as material in classes because it's a very interesting program about contemporary politics and social issues. Yeah.
Great. Do men and women tend to like the same kind of programs? Why not?
I don't know. I think maybe they don't. I think sometimes women maybe enjoy things like talent shows and these kind of reality TV programs more than men do. It's hard to say. I don't personally like reality TV. I think it's kind of silly. But I've also worked in environments where I had a lot of female colleagues, and they used to love these kind of bachelor shows and game shows and reality TV fantasy shows. I don't really follow them, but they used to really love them and, know the characters and watch them. So I think there's maybe a difference in what women like, and maybe soap operas too would be an example of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Now let's talk about the effects of TV. Some people think that watching TV can be a negative influence. Would you agree?
Well, I don't want to be too negative about TV, but I do think that for younger people, if it's too violent, if it has too many mature situations that a younger person might not be able to understand properly or handle, then it could be a bad influence. Again, I don't believe in censorship or think that it's bad necessarily for younger people to be exposed to things that are unusual. I talked about The Twilight Zone before, which is a show that in many ways was very mature for younger people to watch because of the subject matter. But to me, it was very intelligent the way it was handled. And I think programs that maybe are not intelligent in the way they handle them could be a bad influence on younger people, maybe in the same way that, for example, violent video games could be a bad influence.
I see. Thank you. What benefits can TV bring to people?
Well, I think it can be a good social thing in the sense that, at least when I was younger, I don't know if people do this anymore, but we used to have what were called water cooler shows. If you've heard this expression, it means like people that you would go to work the next day and everyone watched the same show. They would watch the latest episode of the latest show, and then when they go to work, they stand at the water cooler or in the lunchroom and they talk about it. So it was kind of a social event. People didn't watch it together, but they would talk about it, and it brought people together because you had a common cultural event that you could discuss.
Great. What priorities do you think TV stations should have?
Oh, I don't know. I guess they should just be there mostly to entertain, but I also think they should, as far as programming for news and things like that, they should be honest, and they should be, willing to say what's going on, even if it's negative in a given country. I don't think that they should be telling propaganda to people about the politics of the country and things like that. So That would be my answer specifically with regards to, I guess I'm thinking of news programming and journalism and things like that.
Okay, what about developments in programming? What kind of interactive programs are there in your country?
So once again, you'll see an example here of how we've tried to create a natural response to exam questions that you may not be prepared for. You'll notice that I was a little caught off guard by the topic here of interactive TV programming. And again, the point I want to reiterate is always try to give a fully developed answer. We can't stress enough that the point of the exam is to show your English speaking ability. It's not that the instructor cares that much about whether you agree or disagree with the topic or what your opinion is on the prompt. So even in a situation where the question might be confusing for you, always try to develop an answer and don't give a one-word response. I have to be honest, I'm not really familiar with interactive programs because, as I said, I've been living abroad for a long time and I get most of my news and entertainment from the internet. So I'm not sure what an interactive program is. I understand, obviously, the word interactive, what it means, but in the context of programming, I'm not sure if these are sort of game shows or programs where audience members from home can participate in the show in some way and influence the outcome. I would have to see one. So it sounds like an interesting idea, but I honestly have never seen a so-called interactive program.
Thank you. Are these a good or bad development and why?
They sound to me like a good development. Again, I have not seen one, but I think television and media have to be very competitive nowadays because there is so much popularity of the internet. There's so much that people can download online without having to depend on television stations, that they have to do what they can to remain competitive. And one way to do that is by being, of course, innovative. And I think that this sounds to me like a very innovative idea that would draw back viewers who might otherwise be bored with television and want to go to other types of entertainment.
Thanks. What kind of programs will there be in the future, do you think?
That's a very good question, and it's hard to predict because, as I said, I think that traditional media, such as television, is finding it very difficult to maintain popularity now because of the changes in technology, and fewer people are watching television now than they were 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, maybe. So I don't know what kind of programs there will be. I hope that they find more ways to do like this sort of thing, like interactive programming and programming that brings people back to this type of media. What those things might be, I don't know, because it's hard to predict the future, and maybe 20 years from now we will all find the internet boring because something else will have come along. So it's hard to say.
All right, thank you very much. This is the end of speaking test, and I am really grateful for your time.
Thank you very much.
Follow us on social media. Follow us on social media.